Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Stage 1, Week 3 results. Yes, so I'm feeling much better than I was last week, which is pleasing, because damn, I felt rubbish. Anyway, let's get straight into our results. This was a very, very crucial week for some of our teams in the league if they wanted any hopes of reaching the stage playoffs. And do remember that the stage only has 7 games for each team this time round, not 10. So some of these teams really don't have much more to play in this stage, even though there was a couple of weeks remaining. So, first up we had the winless Washington Justice taking on the Philadelphia Fusion, who had had an up and down start to the season, it's fair to say. Now, we really didn't get any surprises from this map, but Washington did put up a fight. The problem with Washington is they're just not there. If you see what I mean? They're not quite on the level of all the other teams right now, and it's just narrowly losing them games. 3-1 to the Philadelphia Fusion. Fusion bounced back after a less than ideal week last week. Seoul Dynasty up next. Now this was an interesting one. This was against the Boston Uprising. Boston Uprising now have fusions available to them after the big mix-up last week, which ultimately led to Shanghai Dragon's first win. Seoul Dynasty still... What do we do with Seoul, really? Sometimes they look really good. Sometimes they look rubbish. Seoul. They lose 3-1 to Boston. Boston bounced back after a difficult week last week, losing fusions. I really, with fusions, expected Boston to win this one, because Seoul are just too inconsistent. Some of these games are ridiculously difficult to call right now, because some teams are just so up and down, you don't know what they're going to pull out of the bag. And we'll see more of that later on. Next up, we have the Florida Mayhem. Again, another team very hard to predict. We're going up against the Guangzhou Charge, a team quite easy to predict, because they're going to make quite attacking, aggressive plays against you. And ultimately, Florida Mayhem couldn't cope with that. It did go to 5 mats, but Guangzhou Charge did pull out the win, 3-2. Next up, we had the much fancied San Francisco Shock taking on the Hangzhou Spark, who had a difficult week last week after a blindingly good week 1. SF Shock coming off the loss to Vancouver, which was much narrower than anyone, as people might look at the scoreline between Shock and Vancouver and say, well, that wasn't close, but it was. It was just Vancouver clutched. Shock win this one 3-1. No surprises here that Hangzhou, they're the chasing pack, Hangzhou. I fully believe that. They're the chasing pack rather than the leading pack. I'm expecting Shock to be part of that leading pack once they get a bit more consistency. And remember, Shock have got an incredibly difficult stage 1. Their fixtures they couldn't be much more difficult than they are. So, in all fairness, Shock getting into the playoffs in stage 1 would be very good for them anyway. Next up, we had a big match. This was a big match with stage playoff implications. This was Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the London Spitfire. Now, Spitfire had a very bad week 1, but bounced back massively in week 2. Gladiators, on a 1-2 record at that point, they needed to win the game. It was extremely close, but London Spitfire edged it. Now that's really interesting. This is Spitfire's only game of the week, putting them on a 3-2 record. It propels Spitfire into those playoff places, which is quite crazy when you think about it, considering London's start to the stage. London really are bouncing back with Prophet on Zarya and Guard on Brigitte. And again, we saw Guard's Sombra, which is incredibly dominant on Dorado. So, I'm very interested to see London versus Shanghai, which is next week, because Shanghai like to play a lot of Sombra with Ding, or Diding, as I like to call him. So the matchup between Ding and Guard could be massive if they go Sombra vs Sombra. That should be some crazy Overwatch. So, Gladiators in a bad position after that one. They have another game this week. So, moving on. We have the Toronto Defiant taking on the New York Excelsior. New York Excelsior win this one. There's no surprises here. Toronto do take a map off NYXL though, which is promising for Toronto in itself. Because Toronto have looked decent during this stage. Excelsior are unbeatable at the moment, and they don't have to play Vancouver. So I really do expect Excelsior to go through this unbeaten at that stage. Vancouver Titans then took on the Los Angeles Valiant. Valiant still winless. Yeah, and after that they still were winless. They weren't going to beat Vancouver, realistically, were they? Vancouver are ridiculously good. With their ult combos and their synergy, Vancouver are just ridiculous. And it will be interesting to see how Vancouver adapt if we move away from GOATs. It'll be very interesting to see how Vancouver do. Next up, we have the Shanghai Dragons playing their first game since they got their first win. And they were playing the Chengdu Hunters. Chengdu Hunters, that all-Chinese lineup. Shanghai get their first 4-0 as an organisation. Yeah, I didn't see that one coming either. I did not expect Shanghai to 4-0 Chengdu. That's a bad result for Chengdu, in all respects. But Shanghai, what a massive win. Great morale boost for Shanghai. Now, next up is possibly one of the most crazy fixtures of them all. Paris Eternal taking on the Atlanta Reign. Now, Atlanta Reign had surprised a lot of people coming into this. We knew Paris Eternal's GOATs would be very good, considering they're a European team. Atlanta have thrown some real curveballs. We've seen Defran playing well on the Zarya. We've seen Dogman fragging on Zen. We've also seen Defran's Torb, which we really didn't expect in a serious competitive environment. And Paris were bad. They lose 4-0 to Atlanta, which is a massive win for Atlanta. No one could have predicted that, and this is what I mean about this right now. There are some crazy results going around. Atlanta 4-0ing Paris was never foreseen by anyone. Most people had Paris winning this one, including me. Bad result for Paris, and considering it's their only game of the week, we will see how they bounce back next week. Bad result for Paris, but fantastic result for Atlanta Reign, and that should get them into those playoffs. Florida Mayhem then took on the Houston Outlaws. Two teams down the bottom of our rankings right now. Houston really needed a win here. Florida are kind of like, they could pick up a really obscure win against a team they shouldn't win against, i.e. like the Fusion. But Houston, they need a win here, and they do get it. They get it 3-1. Disappointing result for Florida. I thought it'd be a 5-mapper, to be quite honest, but Houston get the win they need. But I really don't see either of those teams getting to the playoffs right now. Next up, we have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Washington Justice. Washington Justice, oh, difficult week, dudes. 4-0 to the San Francisco Shock. Shock do exactly what they should be doing here. Some crazy fast attacks from Shock. They should be 4-0ing opponents like Washington, and Shock get the job done. Next up, we have the Shanghai Dragons in action again against the inconsistent Dallas Fuel. Dallas Fuel come off the back of a very good win against Philadelphia Fusion. But Shanghai obviously coming off the back of 2 wins on the bounce, their first ever in Overwatch League competitive history. So this is a really tight one. Dallas Fuel do edge it 3-2 though, which makes that Shanghai Dragons versus London Spitfire game even more interesting in terms of stage playoff implications. That next week is going to be one hell of a matchup. Watch this space. Next up, we have the Boston Uprising taking on the Toronto Defiant. Now, considering Fusions was back, I actually had Boston to win this one, but Toronto obviously had been looking very good, taking a map off New York Excelsior earlier in the week. Toronto do win this one, but they win it 3-1. It was much more convincing for Toronto than I had expected over Boston, and Toronto are definitely growing as a team. And I think we've got to say that we're expecting to see Toronto in those playoffs now. I think they'll squeeze in. I really do think they'll squeeze in. Very interesting for Toronto. Interesting times. And I'd like to see what else they can do. I want to see the meta change and see these teams. Yeah, we know what London and Gladiators and Houston and NYXL can do in a DPS meta or a sniper meta or a dive meta. We know what they can do. But I want to see teams like the Washington Justice, Atlanta, Paris, Toronto. I want to see Hangzhou, Guangzhou. I want to see these teams play something other than GOATS. I want to see these teams go into a meta where it's not tank heavy. Just to see some of these DPS players. Because I know Happy for Guangzhou is a fantastic Widowmaker. And we've seen some of it, but imagine Guangzhou in a double sniper meta. They could be real contenders, you know. Moving on after that, we have the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. This was absolutely hands down a must win for Los Angeles Gladiators. No doubt about it. If they wanted any hopes of getting to the stage playoffs, they had to beat Hangzhou here. But Hangzhou pull out the 3-1 win over the Los Angeles Gladiators, and on Route 66 it was in quite dominating style. So, a very good win for Hangzhou. Putting them on a 3-3 record, that means they're in with a shout. They have to win their next game, but that puts them in there. It puts them in the mix, which is where they need to be. Hangzhou are a bit lower than I expected right now, but no, not to the extent the Gladiators and Valiant are. Gladiators, whew, down in 17th with a 1-4 record. They're really not doing too well right now with the synergy required for GOATS. I don't know about Decay on Zarya. They looked better with Shawfall earlier in the stage. It's a difficult one. Decay is very good. Don't get me wrong. Something's not right for the Gladiators. Same with Valiant. Los Angeles is going through a difficult time of it right now. And we're waiting to see the little spark, that wasn't a joke, but the little spark of brilliance that can propel them to up the table, because they really shouldn't be in 17th and 19th respectively. That's not where we're expecting these teams. Okay. Well, we don't know whether the Valiant are going to be 19th or not, because this segment is being recorded before Valiant play their game against Guangzhou. So, there you have it. But with the power of technology and time, obviously, those games have now happened. The last two games of the week, Los Angeles Valiant taking on the Guangzhou Charge was the first of these, and this was quite a crucial game for Valiant. If they lost it, they would be out of the playoffs, definitely, for Stage 1. So, must-win game for Valiant. Guangzhou looking very good though. With their aggressive style, it's working for them in this meta, but an aggressive style will work in this meta. If you press W in GOATS, then you're normally going to come out on top. But Valiant put up a fight, but it ends up being a 3-1 for Guangzhou. This leaves Valiant outside the playoffs for Stage 1 on a 0-5 record currently, which is unthinkable at the start of the season. Remember, this is the team that finished second in the overall standings last season. Valiant have got some questions to ask of themselves and stuff to sort out, because this is not the Valiant we know. I did say earlier on, just before the season started, that they would miss Soon, and although it's not the meta for Soon to flourish right now, Soon is doing well for Paris on the Zarya. So, would Soon Zarya make a difference for Valiant? Who knows. But definitely difficult times for Valiant. Guangzhou, this propels them up into playoff contention. Something we perhaps wouldn't have expected at the start of the season. Last of all, we have the match that was billed as the match of the week. I don't know really. Seoul are too inconsistent to put up a really good fight against NYXL. It's a 3-1 for NYXL. This seals NYXL's place in the Stage 1 playoffs. They still haven't missed the playoffs in their Overwatch League careers. Yeah, NYXL looking very good right now. Seoul, they're not there. And going 0-2 this week is going to hurt them badly. Not so much losing to Excel, but losing to Boston hurts them. So, difficult times for Seoul. Like, I was hopeful that we would see a new and fresh Seoul Dynasty. I think this is a better Seoul Dynasty than last season. Because if this was Seoul Dynasty from last season, we'd be seeing them down with the likes of Florida. But it's not as good as Seoul Dynasty as I expected. Maybe that'll change if the meta changes. I wouldn't have thought Seoul are a team that would get on with GOATS very well. So, yeah, it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. Should we move on to our standings, though? So, at the top of the standings, with a 6-0 record, only one more game to play for the rest of Stage 1, our New York Excelsior, they have sealed their Stage 1 playoff place with a map differential plus 12. Looking very good as ever. Vancouver are in second with a 4-0 record. They still got another 3 games to play, so a lot could change for Vancouver. They've got to go up against Paris next week, which is a massive game for the Eternal, by the way. So that should be interesting. Atlanta, our surprise package in third, with a 3-1 record with that brilliant win over Paris. Fourth, San Francisco Shock are getting back up there. This is where we expected Shock to be. It's not been the easiest of fixture schedules in Stage 1 for Shock, and it does stay quite tough. I believe they've got to take NYXL, but I'm not sure. Is it next week for NYXL for Shock? That should be a big teller for Shock. They did lose to Vancouver. Can XL clutch like Vancouver did though? Because Vancouver really had to clutch to beat Shock. Next up in 5th we have Guangzhou Charge. Another big surprise from this season so far. Their aggressive style really working well with the GOATS meta. 6th we have the Philadelphia Fusion, about where we think Philadelphia are right now. Again, they're in that tussle. They're on a 3-2 record. Shock, Charge, Fusion, and the joint 7th place teams, which are Toronto Defiant and London Spitfire, all on a 3-2 record. Just in those playoffs right now. Just outside, in 9th, on a 2-1 record, we have Paris Eternal. That defeat to Atlanta really hurt them. They would be right up with Vancouver if they had not lost. So, that game might have big implications when it comes to stage playoffs. In 10th, on another 3-2 record, but with a poor map differential, is Dallas Fuel. Dallas Fuel definitely in with a chance of getting those stage playoffs. So, promising times for the Fuel, also promising times for the Hangzhou Spark, who are on a 3-3 record. But with only one more game to play, it's going to be difficult for Hangzhou. Their results will have to go their way, which is unlikely. Plus, who have Hangzhou got to play next week? I think it's Toronto. So that is a difficult game for Guangzhou and Hangzhou, and that's one they will have to win if they want to get into those playoffs. Chengdu Hunt is in 12th with a 2-2 record, still within a chance of those playoffs. Seoul Dynasty in 13th with a 2-3 record, looking like outsiders now. They're joint on a 2-3 record with Shanghai, Boston, and Houston. All of them look like outsiders for the playoffs right now. I'd be extremely surprised if they made it with a 4-3 record, which would be their best case scenario right now. Shanghai have got to play London though, which is a big game for Shanghai next week. If Shanghai win that, then that really does change things, but it's difficult. Also, Shanghai have got to play Dallas again next week. So, Shanghai, out of the teams that are 2-3 right now, Shanghai have the best chance of getting into those playoffs because their next 2 games are against London and Dallas. The 2 people who can get into those playoffs and are in contention for those playoffs, London are already in them. Dallas are only just outside on map differential. So, big week for Shanghai next week. So, in 17th, because we've covered Houston and Boston and all that, the Los Angeles Gladiators. This is surprising on a 1-4 record, joint 1-4 record with Florida Mayhem. Florida Mayhem in an 18th with a -7 map differential though. Gladiators is a surprise. They lost narrowly to London. It was a big win for London. If London had lost that, then I don't think they would make the stage playoffs. But Gladiators, it's just not their meta, I don't think. They liked playing their DPS. They still like to throw a bit of the DPS out there at times, and it's not working so much. Difficult for Gladiators. Florida Mayhem, again, looking very, very inconsistent. Not much we could say about the Florida Mayhem. Washington Justice, 0-4 record in 19th. Yeah, it's Washington. I think this is what we expected. It's certainly what I expected at the start of the season. And then the unexpected happened. In 20th, we have the Los Angeles Valiant. on a 0-5 record and out of the playoffs mathematically now. It's a tough time for Valiant. Tough time. Yeah, there's not much more to say. They just look out of sorts. They don't look like they can piece the things together right now. So, those are your standings. Those are your results. Currently in the playoffs are New York, Vancouver, Atlanta, San Francisco, Guangzhou, Philadelphia, Toronto and London. But that can all change in the next 2 weeks. Some don't have to play many games, some have to play a lot of games. Especially Paris, they've got 4 games in the next 2 weeks, which will decide their stage playoffs and could have big implications for the whole season. But, for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then!